force of Delhi and in Punjab. So I know a lot of us have heard a lot of the stories. We've heard a lot of the backdrop. And whenever we hear, Jab hum aaye the, aisa tha, and how much Delhi has changed. So today we'll hear about Priya. What is this immigrant spirit? And because we see that everywhere, that they have a certain force with them, a certain desire. And that, especially what she says, that desire never to give up. We'll delve into that. I am Sukirti Gupta. I'm the founder of Sipping Thoughts Live, and I'm excited to do this. So as we journey back in time with Priya, I'm excited to welcome her. She lives in Pune with her husband and, as she says, two dogs. So writing is now her second career. She graduated with an MFA in creative writing from Goddard College in Vermont in 2017. And for those of you who don't know, Vermont is absolutely beautiful. I'm from Rhode Island, so I can definitely vouch for it. It's one of the prettiest places on earth. So one of Priya's short stories, An Affair, was published by Indian Ruminations. A second short story, The Tattoo Artist, was published in Live Encounters. Her third story, Daughter's Revenge, and that sounds really, really interesting, was appeared in the Kitaab. So we're going to ask about that too. So what is the Daughter's Revenge? So welcome, Priya. We're excited to have you with us.
Nice to be here. Nice to be here, Sukirti.
So tell us, Priya, why did you want to write about the partition, and especially this book, The Ladies Tailor?
So my grandparents came from, from Pakistan. They were impacted by partition. And the book is dedicated to my paternal grandparents, but the book is not their story. It is more, I think, an interest that I had in writing a story that talks about overcoming odds, and it could have been any kind of tumultuous time. But I chose partition because I personally, nobody talked about it. And so I personally wanted to know more. I wanted to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of, what really happened. And so that was the premise behind both partition and the Ladies Tailor story.
So how did you go about your research and putting this story together, especially understanding the time period, how people lived, what were their attitudes, what was their tonality? How did you go about that?
So, I started researching in 2017, which was the 70th year of independence. And so a lot of work had started in the previous year and the coming year on partition archives. The Partition Museum in Amritsar was set up around that time. So there was a lot of activity around partition. I went to Oxford, and there was a workshop only on partition, not on the 70th anniversary of independence of India, but more on the partition. So that was kind of, I read a lot. I read fiction, I read nonfiction. The thing that I didn't do was I didn't talk to anyone. I did not want to be influenced by anybody's biases and prejudices. And, I wanted to figure it out for myself.
So when we talk about the power of the human spirit, and of course, we're talking about the positive side, but your book also delves into that there is a dark side. So as we see people go through these very strenuous times, there are also maybe things that they're not so proud of what they have done.
This is something that a lot of people who are writing about partition are mentioning. Anchal Malhotra in her book mentions this as well, and everybody talks about it now, is that there was no blame to be assigned. Everybody, it was a time where people kind of got caught up and inflamed, I would say, by the circumstances, by their leaders, by certain situations, which something that, in normal times, they probably would not have done, they did. So you do, I mean, there is a thing that burns inside of you when you see something happen around you and you want to do something about it. And it is not just simply talking about it or writing about it, it's taking action, which is, something that I won't say what he did, but what Gurdev did. And then, of course, he regretted it for the rest of his life.
And that's very, very interesting, because even though when you move on and when you come and after the partition, you literally have nothing. you are living in a camp, and you are using public toilets no matter what your stature in life has been. It's a very humbling experience. Tell us about that, and how does that change one person?
It's there is in my story, and I think this happened with a lot of people as well, is that everybody had relatives on the other side. It was one country. Lahore and Amritsar are 30 kilometers apart. So people had relatives who were already in India, settled with homes and property, and I talk a lot about that in the book. In fact, I talk about 12 or 14 different homes. I had this thing about homes, but because I think that there's a connection, when you lose your home and you come over, and you have to, not only have you lost your home, people who your relatives have not. And they're still whole. And the feeling that, and I talk about this as well, that, Gurdev is worried that, Simrat is going to be put into the kitchen saying, cook for us all your good, old recipes and so on. And slowly it would be like, they're the show and tell of the neighborhood. Here's our family who came in from Pakistan. So it's a terrible, terrible, I think, feeling of losing your home. And you're with people who've also lost their homes, but you're also around people who've not.
And you're around a circumstance that is very, very difficult. But this book, of course, is a great read. It's a great story. But what are some of the key things that you wanted people to take away when they were reading this book?
So, I did not write the book there was no moral, but I do have, in my own life, I have this thing about, never give in. It's my school motto as well, Go Sana. And so there is this thing that I have that, you have to savor every moment, good and bad. You have to do your best. You have to keep trying. You can't, I see a lot of people who kind of sit back at some point, and I really want to nurture, at least in, the people who I know, that keep trying for something, do something, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be, but, just keep aspiring and keep doing.
That's very nice. But let's talk about something. Of course, we all love romance, and we talk here about the man-woman relationship, especially exploring the fact about maybe after you're in a certain age, an older love story. Tell us about that. But they still shake and quiver at the knees.
I really struggled with this. I wrote a sex scene. I did. And then I took it out because, for one thing, it's not easy to write that. And for another, I didn't want it to be so easy. I really wanted them to struggle. And I did not want them to be impacted by society and norms. So I put that away very quickly, because, he says, what about your family? What are they going to say? And I'm like, she says, I don't care about my family anymore. They did all the right things the first time. And guess what? My husband died. So, so I put all that aside. I want them to really struggle with this. I want them to really kind of work through it. I want them
but they're also struggling with their identity issues because he's a Sikh and she's a Muslim.
Yeah. So I didn't want that to play in. That's why I kind of addressed it and set it aside. I wanted it to be human to human, and see the struggle that you go through, because you have trust issues. You have, her husband died, his wife left him, and I'm saying too much, but you have, at that age, when you're starting out in a romance for the second time, there are massive trust issues. There's a lot that you have to deal with. So I wanted to make sure that happened, rather than a quick jumping into bed and and kind of, that does not sort things out in a relationship of this sort, right? There has to be some big struggles.
But why the focus on Gurudev? Let's come back to the central character, because there were so many interesting characters. And I was like, what happened to this person? What happened to that person? And I'm still waiting to know what happened to them.
So, I had a bit of a thing. I was torn between whether I should just, kill Simrat on the operating table or let her live. And I realized that she had to live because there was no other way for Gurudev to transform. Maybe men of that era were misogynist assholes, or difficult.
You said it very, very clearly.
Okay, but I didn't want I wanted to give my character a chance, to change. And the only way that I could do that was, to give him a slap on the face, that he would like really think about and take some time to recover from. So that was the reason why, because I'm a diehard feminist. I don't, I would have, I think in my next book, I do have my main protagonist is a woman. But in this one, I wanted to teach this man a bit of a lesson. So his two female protagonists are both
very strong.
Yeah, very strong. One is feisty, one is kind of quiet in her way, but she gets back at him. So
she does, and in her own way.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about Gurudev and his power, and especially because this talk is all about the power of the human spirit. So let's talk about him and his transformation and how he's able to continue despite all the odds.
See, so this is the thing, right? I feel that there was a time when I felt that changing your mind is a sign of a weak person. And then as I grew older, I realized that changing your mind is actually a mark of a strong person. It's not weak at all. It takes strength, it takes balls, it takes courage to say, I was wrong and I'm going to do this differently. And, so I wanted him to, kind of stand up and say that, I screwed up and my relationship, and I'm not going to do this again. I'm going to do it differently. And that's the reason he says that he didn't go after her. Because if he had gone after her, it would have taken the story, of course, taken the story in a different direction. And also, it's like he would have found her easily. He's a resourceful man, and now he's got a lot of connections and so on, and with the refugee community and so on. So he would have found her easily, but he chose to not do that, which I think is a sign of immense strength and balls, because it would if he would have like saved face if he had found her and brought her back and punished her, and that would have been like the traditional normal thing to do. But I didn't want that. I wanted to show that it takes balls to change your mind. It takes courage, to kind of say I was wrong and I'm going to change.
Fantastic. But why do you now consider writing as your second career? Because you've been writing for a while now.
I actually have been in the corporate world for 22 years. And I started with an MBA from Vanderbilt in 1992, and worked for 11 years in the US and 11 years in India in telecom, in marketing, business development, product management, and all kinds of fun roles. And 8 years ago, I decided to switch. The reason I decided to switch was because we kind of got to a place, my husband and I, where I could financially, and I could kind of really devote. And I used to tease my husband because my son and I went to college at the same time. So I'm like, oh gosh, you have two kids in school that you have to pay for. So, but I did start 8 years ago, and I did the whole thing. I
want you to tell us about this, because you got your MFA in creative writing. I know a lot of people may not have heard it, but in 2017. So yes, you really did go back and get this degree.
I did. I went back in 2015, and before that, I did online classes. I did that National Novel Writers Month. I wrote a 50,000 word novel to see if I could do it. I mean, I didn't know if I could actually put 50,000 words down, and then I went and got an MFA. and I started writing, and I have one book before this which I haven't published. I'm holding on to it, maybe later. But then this one, I really kind of put some thought into it on what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it and what my characters would be. And I think one of the things that I really focus on is my characters. I want them to. I I joke with my husband that, you know, I'm afraid that some good Dave is just going to like open the front door and walk in, and I'm going to try to figure out what he's going to say to me, because, you know, I'm the author.
No, definitely your characters are very intriguing, and I will not leave our listeners hanging because we've got to talk about this daughter's revenge. Your title is so killing.
Oh God. You know, Daughter's Revenge. I hope you all go read it. It's on Kitaab. It's behind a paywall, unfortunately, but it's not expensive. But that's the story. The story is a period story, and it's about these three girls who are, you know, the oldest one actually takes care of her two younger sisters, and they're sort of being molested by this guy who wants to take them, you know. And it's a very interesting story that you have to read. Like I said, you know, that there are charioteers' daughters, the three of them, and they find a way to take revenge on the two girls who had been molested, and on their father who let it happen. So it's
Very powerful. Some justice is there, because, you know, I mean, we see this as very, very common.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, that's the thing, right? That's why I said I'm a diehard feminist, and so, you know, even in that period drama-y kind of story, I made sure that the girls stood up for themselves and, you know, took revenge.
And all your women do stand up for themselves. So what do you want people to know as we are ending our conversation about Ladies Tailor?
You know, I want people to know that so one little thing, I ran into one of my son's friends. My son is 25, and I ran into one of his friends and I said, dude, have you read my book? So he's like, Auntie, it's for women. It's for ladies, no? Because it's called Ladies. I'm like, no.
Like the signboard, Ladies Tailor. Do you have a woman inside?
Yeah. So I said, no. It's the protagonist is a man. He's a burly, strong man. And no. You better read it. And he's like, okay, Auntie, I will read it. But my thing is that I think it's a fun read. There are a few lessons that I mean, I don't want to at all bring in religion and so on into this, but I do feel sometimes that we are so close as people, and yet we're two countries, and it's just, you know, it's just unfortunate.
Well, thank you, Priya. And like I said, I just finished it yesterday. I'm waiting for the sequel. So what are you working on next? Because I have to know what happens to Simran.
I am not working on the sequel right now. I'm working on a prequel, because I have a hypothesis that adventurism runs in families. And so I'm writing about 4 generations before Gurdev, his forefathers. And in each case, and there was a lot of, you know, stuff that went on in India, in, you know, in those 4 generations. You know, there was the Anglo-Sikh Wars, there was the mutiny, there was independence movement. So I had a lot to pick from, but basically that's what I'm writing about, is 4 generations of adventurers that precede Gurdev, and that kind of probably make him, you know, what he is and what he did. I'm also working on, I'm in the editing. I'm in the research stage, but I'm also working on a novel which has a backdrop of financial scandal in financial scams, which is the other thing that I read about that really troubles me. And I said, I want to get into and understand. So it's absolute fiction, but it is kind of set.
But your fiction is very real. I mean, honestly, you feel like you're there.
But yeah, this one's kind of got the Nirav Modi, Harshad Mehta kind of a backdrop, and it's a little crazy. So little tongue in cheek, and that one I'm editing, and hopefully someone will buy it.
Well, thank you, Priya, and wish you lots of luck. Really love the book.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.